Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another tip. Today's is a good one, guys. Today's tip has to do with wacky rigs and more specifically Neko rigs, which are, for the most part, a weighted version of just a weightless wacky rig, but it's not a weighted wacky rig either. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and I want to tell you a couple of tips that will get you a lot more bites, and at the same time, it will make your rig significantly more weedless. And that's one of the biggest things out there, whether you're throwing an exposed hook or a weedless version of a wacky rig hook, it's going to make it that much more weedless, and it's going to keep you from getting frustrated and snagged all day long. So those are the tips I'm going to give you today, and they're really good ones. Before I do get into that, I do want to remind you guys that if you're purchasing some tackle, it would be great if you could use my Tackle Warehouse affiliate link, which I provide in the description of the video. It's a great way to support the channel, and it's very much appreciated. All right, guys, so let's talk about this. The wacky rig and the Neko rig have been an extreme player for me over the years in my tournaments, so much so that I've always got at least one tied on, no matter where I'm at in the country, whether it's smallmouth, spotted bass, or largemouth. A weightless wacky rig or a Neko rig can become a major player. And the difference for me really comes down to what depth I'm fishing and the fall rate that I want. But I generally do not choose to throw a weighted wacky rig hook. And what I mean by that is, you have your wacky rig hook like this. You can get ones that have a ball head on it that are weighted. The reason I don't like them is because when you rig it a wacky rig worm style, that weighted hook is going to pull from the center down. So when this falls, it falls like that, and you lose most of that, that vibrating motion from a wacky rig. So a weighted wacky rig hook is not the ideal for me. So if I do not use a weightless wacky rig and I want to add weight, I switch over to the Neko rig, which is pretty basic. It's very similar. And I'll rig one just so you can see it. I'll use this Max Scent Magnum Hitworm by Berkley. In this case, I'm going to use an O-ring because an O-ring is what I prefer to use with a Neko rig, and I'm going to show you why. So you slide the O-ring up the worm a good portion, and that's what I'm going to slide my hook through. Of late, the weedless wacky rig hook that I've preferred is this Owner Jungle Wacky Weedless hook. This one right here. It has performed quite well for me, and I'm pretty happy with it. So then I would rig this under the O-ring, and there you go. I've got either a weightless wacky rig, or I'm going to make it a Neko rig just by simply adding a nail weight to the head of the worm. And if I add it to the head of the worm, this is what most people would do. They slide it in. So now I've got some weight in that worm so that when it falls, it's going to fall in a spiraling motion, much more like a tube would fall, which gives the bait more of that dying bait fish look and generates a lot of strikes. Because one, it's falling nose down, so it's falling much faster than a similar weighted wacky rig would fall. But you're also getting that spiraling motion, which creates a reaction strike response from the fish. So I think you get more bites from a Neko rig than you would a similarly weighted wacky rig. Now here's a couple of points I want to point out. So the first, I use two different types of weights. The first is just your simple nail weight like this. Most people would insert it from the bottom down. I will choose to use a basic nail weight if I'm fishing a soft bottom. So muck, something that's got a lot of grass on the bottom, a sand bottom. And instead of inserting straight down into the worm, I will insert from below the worm. And I'll get this started. So you can see it, I'm inserting below the head of the worm, and I will slide that up and then get it completely buried in the worm. The reason I do that is you will lose a lot less nail weights by putting the weight in the worm in that fashion. And because I'm fishing a soft bottom, I don't want any of my weight sticking out because I'm not going to get any sort of sound from it. Now, if I'm fishing a rock bottom, say you're in the Ozarks or Smith Lake in Alabama, or you're just fishing some sort of ledge rock, Then I like to take a screw-in tungsten weight, like this Bass Method Gambit, which has become one of my absolute favorite Neko Rig weights, and you screw it into the head. And this has really large ridges, so it holds really, really well. So I screw it in, and you can see it's sticking out. The reason I like this nail weight when fishing around rock is because when it falls, it clicks off the bottom. You've got a hard substance that it's hitting, and therefore it'll click and make noise, which in a lot of instances I really like to have as a fish attractor. So the choice of nail weight I think is important based on bottom composition. Here's the other big part of this tip though. This is the one that I really truly think a lot of us don't think about, but makes a huge difference. The direction that you rig your hook makes a big difference in terms of how snag resistant it is. What you want to do is rig it so that the point of the hook is facing the tail of the worm. The reason for that is when this bait falls, say my finger is a twig or a branch, when it falls, you got to remember the weight is pulling the worm down. So it's going to fall just like that. So when it's falling, if that hook were to hit my finger, which is a branch, it just slides right up and past it. There's no hook point hooking that branch. It's just going to fall just like that. That's the key. If I were to turn this hook around and have it where the hook point was facing the weight, the hook point's going to be the first thing that hits that branch. And regardless of whether you have a weed barb in here, or you have it just as a unweedless hook, a standard Wacky Rig hook, when that slides down that branch, that's going to catch, just like that. So when that happens, you will get stuck that much more because of the direction that the hook point is in. So I strongly encourage you to make sure that when you rig it, the hook point is away. And this is why I like to use just a straight O-ring in this case, because I'd rather have, if I'm fishing around a lot of brush, fishing around a lot of docks, I'd rather have the hook point parallel with the worm so that when it falls, it does not get snagged by those branches. If I had it just hooked right through the worm, let me get that out, and I had it where it was perpendicular to the worm, it'll hit and it could potentially roll and still catch my finger. So you will get snagged. It's still more snag resistant than if the hook point's facing the weight, but I would just prefer to have it away just like that. So that's a huge key in terms of how snag resistant it's going to be, which means you can put this bait where the fish live and therefore you get more bites. From a bait choice, I use 3 baits almost entirely every time I'm fishing the Neko rig. The first, like I said, the Magnum Hitworm is a great one. I love the Maxcent Berkeley General. And then the last is the BizBaits Dizzy Diamond. I really like this one because the tail floats. There's like an air pocket. So when that hits the bottom, the tail keeps the back of the bait up. That's the Dizzy Diamond by BizBaits. But those 3 baits pretty much get the job done for me. From a color standpoint, if it's dark water, I'm throwing the plum apple like this, or a black. If it's clear, I'm throwing some version of a green pumpkin. I keep it pretty standard from a color standpoint, but these baits will catch you more fish, and you can stay relatively snag resistant by making that one change with your hook point. So I hope this was helpful, guys. If it was, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned. We got another video coming out tomorrow for you.